Alright, so we're back working on the Miata again. So as you can see, I've done a pretty terrible job fixing up this these rusted out frame rails, but they're in there and they got a quick terrible paint coat, or coat of paint, and but those are good to go. At least that's what I'm gonna call them, good to go. So next, what we're doing now, we've got both subframes, the original one with all my good parts on it and the new one from Minitech. So we're going to be swapping over all of the parts that we need off of the old subframe, including the steering rack, control arms. We're going to take this sway bar off, but we're going to leave the end links on the lower control arms because we got a Mazda Speed sway bar to put on it. And you know, the spindles, rotors, everything is getting swapped over to the new subframe, and then we'll bolt the new subframe up to the car. So that's what we're going to try to work on right now. You can see our engine's still sitting over here waiting to go in. I'd really like to get that engine bolted up to the transmission and dropped in the car before it gets cold. So we're hitting the end of summer. I need to get back to working on this one. So here we go. Well, I need new end links anyway, apparently. But I had to get it loose either way. That's the factory sway bar. I've got a Mazda Speed one to swap in, but I'm going to try to reuse these bushings if I can, because they got the mounts on them. Break the steering rack bolts loose. Just simple. We should be able to take this off as a unit.
With the control arms?
Yeah. We're just gonna, we'll each get a side and we'll carry the whole thing over there. With 17s. Yeah. Let's see if this thing will do it. It might just spin. Holy shit. Yep, now I just gotta hold the other side. So it's got this little alignment washer that's offset, and there's a couple slots on the front that it kind of drops down into, and that's how they do the alignment for the, it's one way that they set the camber. So there's a metal slot on each side, and this was sitting just like that. And that bolt has actually got some grooves in it that keep it from turning. So when it was mounted in there, that's how they set the alignment from the factory. We're not going to worry so much about this top control arm. We're going to try to grab the bottom one. So the last thing holding it in is that bolt. But you also have to come over, you have to do it on this side because you got to hold this. You might be able to hold it, you'll probably hold it with the tie rod links.
Yeah.
But then you gotta get this last bolt out. Let me just drag it until it's flat.
I got 6 washers that came with this. Which I'm guessing fill in that.
There's 3 on each side.
Yep.
So if you mix up these offset washers, the one that's got the little degree wheel in it with the little notches goes on the back side, towards the back of the car. And then again, when you set up your upper control arm, to make sure that it's the factory caster on the wheels, you're going to use 3 of these washers on each side, and they zip tie them up in here in this cavity. So that's an idea of where we're gonna have to chop that transmission. I have to cut out down here for the starter.
Down where?
Down this area.
Okay.
You have to cut like a notch out of it for this starter thing to stick in there. And then once that's cut, we're gonna have to grind this down for the water neck on the back of the engine. So we'll have to do like a 45 bevel just to take this part off. And then we can mount this on there. Yeah, we'll put in our shift fork and all that stuff in, and then we'll mount this on there.
Alright, so what are you doing?
So the coolant neck on the back of that engine, we're gonna have to have a, I think it's a 90, maybe a 45 coming off the coolant neck. So we have to clearance this. So I'm just pounding it in so that when we put that hose on that coolant neck, it can come out and go forward. Okay, so we had to go get some hardware because we have to through bolt it. They didn't include any, there wasn't an insert with like threads in it in this because they just made it out of steel. So we went and grabbed some hardware. I got a locking nut. They didn't have any nylocks, so I got this steel kind. But we're gonna through bolt it, but the problem is, and this is factory size hardware, it doesn't go through these holes, so we're gonna have to punch these out a little bit. So I got the drill. I'm gonna drill it out and we can bolt our rack on. Okay, so before you bolt the rack in place, because of how close it is to your bolts on your control arms, you're gonna wanna make sure you go ahead and tighten your control arm bolts down. These are 17 mil, and they've got the washers that align them that are gonna go into the slots. I might torque those someday.
Now it is.
Alright, steering rack's on. I may have to replace this bolt down here. The washer started twisting, but for right now, we're gonna leave it. It'll be all right. I still have to tighten up these upper ones, which I kind of want to do with the suspension raised, but steering rack is bolted down, so we're pretty close to putting this thing in. So me and Billy are gonna go get some food, and then we'll come back and see if we can get this thing in. Seems good enough. Washers aren't loose. You gotta lift that up. There we go. That's it. There we go. Cool. They're basically level. They're level enough they're not going to destroy the bushings when we put the weight of the car on.
What's next?
So now we can go ahead and put the subframe back in. I don't think there's anything else I need to do this with it out. Yeah, I don't see any reason. We already fixed all the rust and everything, so.
Do you have any end links?
We're gonna reuse those for now.
Okay.
Because they're not loose. Just the boot was torn on one of them, so. And I don't feel like screwing around trying to get that other one out. I'm waiting for new ones to show up. Sweet, that went faster than I thought it would. I'll put this under it and we'll slide it back. Okay. Just try to keep the whole unit level.
Okay.
Let me throw this. Alright, so steering rack is aligned, the bolts in there. All I gotta do is tighten it up. I gotta run the 4 nuts on the front of each side of the subframe and then the 2 bolts in the back, and then this thing's bolted in. Oh, you're just filming me picking my nose?
Yes. What?
That socket is part of the car now. Yeah, so she's back in there. I got the steering rack there. You can see the new subframe's all mounted up. Looks good. Looks like a car again. Pretty soon that's where that V6 is gonna be sitting.
And we've got room in the shop now. There's not subframes all over the floor.
Right. We actually have some space. We can pull that engine out and work on this transmission. We gotta do a little bit of stuff. We gotta cut that. Gotta notch it down here. But that was a major step right there. And that's where a lot of the money from your Minitech kit goes. Just into that custom subframe. And it was super simple. All we had to do was get some hardware. I did go ahead and order another bolt for that lower control arm, but it's tight, it's not going anywhere, so it'll be all right. Okay, so let's see, cool. All right, so before we get the transmission bolted onto this engine, while we've got it here and we've got access to everything, because the firewall is going to be right here when the engine's in the car. What I want to do is get rid of all of the unnecessary potential coolant leaks that we could have. So this engine came out of a car that's got a pressurized fuel tank, where coolant tank, where the coolant tank is part of the coolant system. So because of that, it would normally have one of those pressurized tanks like most modern cars do, whereas the one that's in the car just uses an overflow going to the radiator. So since we don't need a pressurized fuel tank, I'm not going to need a bunch of this stuff. So this right here would have been a return from the pressurized fuel tank. And I don't need that. So what I'm going to try to do is crimp this flat and then weld over it with the TIG welder and just fusion weld it so that it's not going to leak. There's some other things back here we're not going to need either. So I know for a fact that this, and this all went to like heated throttle bodies, and I'm not going to be using that feature either. So I should be able to also crimp and weld each one of those 3 bungs right there. And what that's going to do is that's going to simplify our fuel system, or our coolant system. So we've got our inlet, our outlet for the radiator, and then our 2 heater core hoses. So the main goal is to simplify this stuff so that we only use what we need, and when I pressurize it to fill the system to make sure that there's no leaks later, I want to make sure that I don't have like just a rubber cap on this or something that might blow off of there, and then all of a sudden I got a coolant leak somewhere where I can't see it. The other thing is that when I finally go to put this in the car, from what I've seen online, I might have to leave this loose. A lot of people really struggled to get the transmission onto there, going into the clutch and everything lined up to the point where you could bolt it together with the thermostat housing in. So I've ran it down tight for now, but I haven't sealed it. This is probably going to need some sealant in it. I want to make sure that I don't have to take it back apart before I seal it. So it's on there right now for mock-up purposes, but for right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these off and try to get them so that they're going to seal. Awesome. That ought to work. I don't see why it wouldn't. I guess we'll find out when I drop the engine on the floor. We were able to weld all of those up. Hopefully there aren't any pinholes left. I think I got them all taken care of. So now all we have to worry about as far as coolant goes on this engine is going to be the in and out and the heater core. So that should be good to go. Now we can start looking at what we have to do to modify the transmission to get it bolted up to the engine, and then go ahead and do our clutch and all that stuff, and then get them bolted together so we can mount them in.
Yes.
So that's the starter. We're gonna notch the transmission for this piece. But first we're gonna put this adapter plate on the transmission to see how it fits. Yeah. Sweet. I mean, that was way more than I needed to take out. That's what happens when they don't include a
Template or something.
template or anything. There it is. Yeah, there's two other bolt holes down here.
Okay.
So it looks like we'll have this, and this, and then I can probably through bolt this one because that one lines up.
Yeah.
So I could reseal that, or I could just sand it. I mean, it doesn't look like it was leaking all that bad. It's just greasy all over. Some of that could have been from other places. I feel if I take this off and I try to reseal it, it's gonna leak from right here.
Yeah, probably.
Whereas if I leave it, it might weep a little bit, but this car is not perfect, so we'll just leave it. Okay, so there's these two big long bolts that go through here. So we're gonna go ahead and take those out of the adapter plate, and then I'm gonna take it off the transmission. I'm gonna take all these ones that have the yellow tape. I'm gonna take the tape off of them. They're all the same length. Every one of these that's yellow taped is recessed into the plate. So that's why this plate has to go onto the engine side first, because when you put the transmission on it, you can't reach the head of those. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to see if I can bolt this plate up to the transmission. And if I can, and if I'm able to get my starter and everything in, I'm gonna go ahead and Loctite these, put them in and torque them. First, I'm gonna torque these for this little cover plate. I'm gonna red Loctite them, and then I'm gonna torque them down because I probably won't be able to reach those very well. I'll do it while it's out, but don't forget to put these back in.
Do we use any of the bolt holes that are behind that plate? For the transmission, not for the engine. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes in from the back side. Okay. So they're threaded. There's two holes underneath this plate, but the bolt goes in from the back side. So with this plate on, you can still get those bolts in. Pro tip, get yourself some of this Permatex high strength, where's the part number? I don't know. Looks like US number is 27010. Gel twist thread locker red. It's a lot easier to use than the liquid thread lockers, and it goes on as a gel.
feet.
So it's a number 10 for these, for the ones that are recessed. So make sure you grab one of those. Oh, you know what? We gotta make sure we do.
Yeah, cut the transmission.
Cut the transmission. Recording?
Yep.
Okay, so there's a factory dowel pin, and there's also one pre-installed in the sandwich plate. The other side doesn't have one, so that one should be good to go. It's gonna be this little hole right here, but we gotta take this out in order for it to line up. Ta-da! And then, pro tip for when you're installing all of these bolts, and almost any bolts on anything that's Honda, they always like to use fine thread. So make sure you start them by hand, run them in a little bit with a ratchet. That way you know they're not cross-threaded, because they're really easy to cross-thread.
Okay.
So I looked up the torque for the there's one website that's got a bunch of J series torque specs, and the torque for the J series in the car for the transmission to the engine bolts is 47 foot-pounds. So I torqued all 4 of those with red Loctite to 47 foot-pounds. Now we're going to do our last modification to the transmission. We're going to grind this up here. Maybe turn it this way. We're going to grind off this edge so that it can go under the water, the coolant neck over here, and have enough clearance. Hopefully that was enough. Absolutely covered myself in aluminum shavings. Now we get to start going through our box of parts so we can start putting things back on. Oh, it's heavy. This is the engine harness. That'll come after the engine is in the car. Got our clutch. Okay, so next thing we're putting on is this adapter plate. What this does is it allows us to extend the flywheel out, or not flywheel, flywheel?
Yeah, it is the flywheel.
Yeah. It extends the flywheel out to take up the difference in length from this thick plate right here. Forgot something.
I like the way that adapter just looks by itself.
Yeah, it's sweet. One thing I forgot, don't forget your 2 long bolts that go in from the other side into your adapter plate. I'm gonna go ahead and put those in now so I don't forget them. So the Exity clutch kit that they use appears to be part number HCC531. Does not come with an alignment tool, which is really annoying.
We might have one that fits that.
We might have one, but it comes bolted together, so I have to unbolt it, put the flywheel on, and then redo this. Alright, torque on these, it's going to be 2 steps. It's going to be 65 foot-pounds, and then you're gonna go back and bring them all to 72. And the hard part is you gotta hold them in place. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna get a pry bar and jam it down in here using a bolt in one of these holes so that it can't go. Okay, so I got it set to 65 foot-pounds. Alright, now I'm going to go to 72. And this one I'll do in a circle so I don't forget. Alright. Okay, so anytime you put on fresh flywheel, it always comes with some factory oil from when they make it, so you're always going to want to clean it off with some brake clean. Cool. When you put your clutch in, so it goes flywheel and then clutch and then pressure plate, and usually the clutch is labeled with something that indicates which way to put it in, because you can screw it up and put it in backwards. It's pretty easy to not screw that up. This one says TM side, so that'd be transmission side. So the only thing that sucks about this kit is that it doesn't include a alignment tool. So we're gonna have to kind of eyeball it when we put it in, but it's gonna sit something like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay it in here and then try to get one of these bolts started. And the pressure plate has alignment dowels, so you got to make sure you line those up like such. And they're not, it only goes on one way. So if the alignment dowels don't line up, you got to spin it. There we go. So that's the only way that our alignment dowels are going to line up. Make sure you get it right. And I'm going to put one of these in here just to hold it.
Does the clutch look centered?
No, I'm going to start these and then I'm going to line it up before I pull it down.
What's up?
Check out this bolt. It almost looks like it's cracked. I don't know if that goes all the way through or not. It's got a couple weird little marks on it. We're just going to send it. Okay. So I looked up the torque on these and it says 19 foot-pounds. And then I remembered from my 8th gen Civic, everybody knew online on all the forums that when you put them to 19, they can come loose. So everybody just changed it to 25 and they never came loose and they never broke. So I ended up having one actually come loose, had to take the whole transmission back out of it and retorque it with some fresh bolts. So I'm going to send these to 25 foot-pounds. They're stainless, they should be able to handle it, because I don't think 19 is going to be enough. So this sleeve takes up the difference between the new throwout bearing and the one that was in it, and the input shaft. It slides on nice and easy. I should probably grease that one. I'm gonna grease my clutch fork There's 2 spots that need it, right there, and right there. And then I'm gonna grease the inside. Well, I'll just grease the ball, the pivot ball. See, it's got a little reservoir hole on the end of it to keep grease in. A new throwout bearing. Now there's something in the instructions about modifying this throwout bearing, but they said that if you bought the full kit, they already did it. So I think they added a little bit of weld underneath of that, so there's no slack here. But I'm not really sure. It said it was good to go. So I'm gonna get that started. And then I gotta get this pivot ball on. You gotta push it in at the same time. Okay. Alright. You got it? Hold it together?
Yeah.
So it's bolted together, hanging in the air on its own. It's we might have to rethink where we've got our lift mount brackets bolted, because it's pretty precarious right now, but it does have to tilt back a whole lot to go into the car, so right now it's just kind of sideways. But other than finding some special hardware and putting the starter on, we should be good for going in the car. Fix that. Yeah, so if you look up in there, the head of that screw, that second screw right there, we had to grind that down because it's right up against the oil pan in order for the starter to go in.
it's fresh in your head, do you want to rant about everything that sucked with that?
Yeah, so when you're putting it in, you're gonna have to, the big problem we had was that where our engine mounts were, as the engine leveled out, it was tilting. So you want to try to make sure that when you add another mount to lift this thing with, that the engine's actually being lifted vertical. The other thing is, when you put it in, you're going to want to take your engine mounts off of your adapter bracket, and then you'll have to put them on in the car, and then kind of pry and push and pull and all that until you can get the bolts in. The other thing is, all of the lines on your power steering are going to be hitting your oil pan. It actually caused a little bit of damage from them dragging against the oil pan. I'm hoping it didn't pop through anywhere, but it doesn't look like it. So you're gonna want to take the brackets that hold your power steering lines off. That way they're not in the way. And then you're also going to want to have somebody underneath controlling the transmission going into the power plant frame. And another trick is to take this stupid washer fluid bottle out of here. I left it in here. I'm surprised everything fit with it, but it was a huge pain in the ass. But we got it. She's in there. Hopefully for the last time and only time.